astrological understandings and forecasts. But I think the thing that I listen to the most is your conviction and holding strong this position of positivity about the world we are moving into and the evolution that we are going through, which of course aligns with me very much. Talk to me a little bit about how you came around to this understanding, if you can. If you can even trace it back.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I'm going to blame you.
Oh.
How do we blame you? Because I think it really began, and you get, I've said this in so many videos, you might have heard me say it, that you did such a service for humanity, Lionsgate 2024, when you and I, as you said, were in cahoots, swapping messages about the astrology, and you were guided to lead a group up to Manchester, and I think it was dawn, it was very early morning, that you had to take the group into meditation, and this psychically, this Excalibur bejeweled sword appeared in front of you, and you were told to pierce the film. I remember those were the words, weren't they? And that you, and having done that, Merlin and Lord Yeshua, if I remember correctly, said you had exceeded all expectations, and that piercing of the film would continue to tear. And I think that was a huge moment for humanity. So I blame you.
What? I don't know what to say now.
Well, I think it really started then, actually. Energetically, I think that was a real pivot point for humanity. I truly do. I'm not just saying that to flatter you. I truly think that was an immense moment, because then we went into the astrology for 2025. Is there anything you'd like to say before I answer your original question?
No, but I think it was kind of divine that you and I had already connected, because of all the people I could think of at that time. And when you feel called to do something and you're receiving these messages, there's still a little human doubt in there. What am I doing? I'm gathering all these people. What am I doing? I don't know what's going to happen. And all these people are trusting me, the sort of responsibility and all that. And that you were the one I felt I needed to connect with, to sort of ground into that the astrology of the moment aligned with the impetus that I felt I was receiving. And to have you as my anchor, truly, gosh, it gave me the extra boost I needed. So it really felt like a divine collaboration to me, and still does as we reflect back on it. You were my tether. You were my tether. So anyway, but what's unfolded since then, and it's interesting because that happened, and then I really moved on to the next thing, and I didn't think so much about it. But it is interesting to look back now and to see where we've come to 18 months later. And it does seem as if the film has continued to tear. 100%. So let's talk about that a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah, and just to answer your original question, Hope, because it's such a great question. I think I really, your piercing of the film was so much in my mind, really, from that point on, from Lionsgate 8/8/2024. But as we went into 2025 as well, because also I've been involved in a retreat with Veda Austin in Glastonbury. And that was in October. That was on a big solar eclipse, as I remember, in October of 2024. And I was asked to make a presentation there. And one of the things that really struck me was some extraordinary geometry between Pluto. Well, actually, they're all dwarf planets, because Pluto is designated as a dwarf planet, although, boy, does it pack a punch of it. It's, there's nothing to nothing dwarf at all. But there were 3 dwarf planets that were coming into what I call a wobbly triangle. It was perfect geometry, but it wasn't perfectly equilateral. It was Pluto, Haumea, linked to the fertility goddess of Hawaii, and Sedna. Now, it's very rare that these come into geometry because, for instance, Sedna has an 11,400-year orbit. Pluto's got a 248-year orbit. Haumea has, I think, 289-year orbit. So, but they were coming into this very unusual geometry that wasn't just about transformation of humanity. It was actually about a complete metamorphosis, a change of state. Because if you follow the mythology of Haumea, about she could, morph her body from an old crone to a young maiden, which we're all very much looking forward to. She could birth babies from all over her body, not just the regular part. There was a regenerative principle with her that was going beyond just the kind of Pluto death, tree falling in a wood, rotting down to make fertile soil and new growth. That's a kind of linearity. But with Haumea, it was regenerative in a different way. And then Sedna, you probably all know the myth that she had an inappropriate marriage, asked her father to come and rescue her. He came in a kayak, big storm blew up. Father throws Sedna out of the canoe to save himself. She tries to cling on to old methods of security. Father chops her fingers off. She drowned, where she floated down to the deep and transmuted into a beautiful sea goddess, and her fingers became new, beautiful sea creatures like dolphins and whales, etc. So that was a whole metamorphosis, not just a linear transformation. So that's what I was talking about actually at that presentation with at Veda's retreat in October 24. And then in 2025, I spotted this very unique configuration that seemed to be completely unique. In fact, no astrologers contradicted that. I believe it's completely unique ever in our history, that we have a very symmetrical trine between Pluto and Uranus. And then at the midpoint of that, we have Saturn and Neptune on 0 degrees of Aries, the very first degree of the zodiac, the world point. So this has tremendous potency. And it's really like the kind of the potential is the rebirth for humanity, a complete relaunch for humanity. And so I got very excited about that. So I've made several videos about, the big picture and convergences and game changers, all about that very unique configuration. That right now, we've got it right now. In fact, it becomes the most exact to the minute in July this year. But it really spans, because they're all slow moving, it really spans 2025 to 2027. And so I got immensely excited about this on top of what I'd spotted with the 3 dwarf planets in this wonky triangle. So I thought, wow, this is really exciting in terms of this, because to credit my very good friend Heather Emsworth, she'd spotted that this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, just to take that element of it, hadn't happened at 0 of Aries since 4,361 BC, almost 6,000 years. This was a big deal, and you can take the various parts of it and we can go back to the seed points, and there's some big themes in there. So I got very excited, but I felt I was going out on a bit of a limb, really, because else really, but anyway, off we go, Mercury and Aries, off we go. And then I heard that Richard Rudd had talked about his whole gene key of freedom, the 55th gene key, his most famous one of the water nymphs to the dragonfly, complete metamorphosis. And he was also talking about a complete genetic mutation across all species that was happening starting in January 2025. And then listening to Lee Harris and his new book, The Future Human, and I was tuning into various other people, and all of these other gifted, brilliant people in their modality and their language were feeding into what I was seeing astrologically. So I was like a kid in a candy store, because I was just, all this kind of application, all these other very clever people are seeing what I'm seeing through my lens. And so that's been true. And we are now clearly absolutely in the crux of the crucible of this change. I mean, you can see it all over in the outer world, how, the old outer world is kind of crashing to earth, and it will get louder. It will get louder and crazier, and, the theatre scenery is collapsing, and the actors are shouting to keep the audience engaged, but, it's just crazy time. And so, I've been talking about that for the last couple of years. Expect that to happen, and it will get louder. So, but our task is very different, I think, as humanity. our task is to say, stay in peace, stay in calm, stay in heart coherence, drop into still point as often as we can, connect with nature, bare feet on the grass, and just be lighthouses in the craziness, be anchor points and stabilizers in the craziness of all of this. And you very kindly said that I have a lot of conviction, and it's the astrology that gives me the conviction. You know, that's my language, that's my lens. So it's the astrology that makes me think, yeah, because I followed it for so many years, and I've over the decades, I've just trusted it more and more. That I don't know what the events will, I don't know how it's going to manifest, but I just trust that it will. And so I think we are in the most extraordinary period of the rebirth for humanity. I truly do. And it, you know, in one lifetime, I believe that we're going to be able to go from kind of regular 3D humanity into a higher dimensional being, depending on our choice of frequency. But it is now available to us in a way it's never been before in previous lifetimes, in that we're doing this in our physicality, and that's unique. A long answer to your question, Hope.
That's a beautiful, beautiful answer, and it brings up this idea of spontaneous metamorphosis. As you were saying, the slow road, the Pluto road, is a linear decay, 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 grow, 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 grow. But is spontaneous metamorphosis possible? And now here's something you may or may not know. And this happened in May of 2012. I just come back from the UK, having been guided there to do a very profound experience at Avebury. And I won't go into that. But when I came home, you know, we always wake up at 5 in the morning when we come back from Europe. So I was up, I was brushing my teeth. My laptop happened to be open on my counter. And it was open to Facebook, strangely. But anyway, I could see this little tiny picture on the top of my Facebook feed of a black background with a purple bubble making an 8. Black background, a purple bubble 8. I'm going, I wonder what that is, you know? And I put down my toothbrush and I get a plus to the thing and I click on it. And it is an interview on CNN that happened in November of the previous year with Paul Laviolette, who at the time was considered to be a deep space aficionado. And he was being interviewed because NASA had just, for the first time, been able to have a camera that could pierce the mist, the clouds, between us and galactic center. And the picture that they got, so imagine, we know we have the spiral of the galaxy when we look at it that way, but if we flipped it this way, like a pancake, we just see little lights basically in a row. Emanating out of the center of that ring were these purple bubbles. So it looked like purple 8. And Paula Violette was explaining that this is kind of like a burp from galactic center. And that this burp was a microwave. And that the microwaves were moving through the galaxy and turning yellow suns into red giants and red giants into brown dwarfs. I remembered that these Russians had done this experiment with a chamber where they had a duck, and then in the chamber behind they had a chicken egg. And they beamed into the chambers some low-grade microwave frequencies. And when the chicken egg hatched, it had the body of a chicken, but a duck bill and webbed feet. So I put these two things together, and I'm thinking, I know also that ice cores have shown that in the past, and Paula Violette was saying this burp happens every 50,000 whatever years. There were instances where there seemed to be spontaneous evolution, where ectoplasm creatures, suddenly then there were endoplasm. So skeletons went from being on the outside to being on the inside overnight. Like they didn't see the in-between stages. So I kind of put all this together, and I realized, could this mean that there really is a wave that's physical, not just metaphor, not just energetic, but there's something coming to us that is going to dramatically change us quickly. So I'm thinking, and then last week I saw a little video, and it showed a picture, and it said there was a massive wave moving through the galaxy, and it showed a picture of it. So I'm just thinking, with this setup that you're talking about, what's possible here is that kind of moment, spontaneous switch could happen.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Hope. It really is, because I know over the last sort of 18 months or so, the James Webb Telescope has picked up some very high bursts of energy from the galactic center that they haven't seen before. And you may have heard my conversations with Dr. David Clements.
Yes.
He said that these big bursts of evolutionary energy, and he said the first of them was going to be on the 4th of December. And this was in sort of November time. I was speaking to him, recorded on my channel. And I said, well, gosh, that's a full supermoon in Gemini. That's kind of karmic choice point for humanity. And of course, he didn't know it was a full supermoon. I mean, why should he? But he's talking about a series of big evolutionary waves coming in all through this year for humanity. And then, of course, you have, wonderful people like Ann Tucker, who I share information with, and she's been talking through her angel messages very consistently for the last, 2 years at least, about this solar flash.
Yes.
We're building up, the sun is super active right now. We've just had a whole series of very active bursts from the sun. That is going to continue, I think. And Anne, in her messages, has been saying there's going to be this big solar flash, which will last 3 days. And essentially our guidance is just to go into a kind of hibernation for 3 days. We'll feel very heavy and tired, just go into a kind of chrysalis or cocoon state. And when we emerge, we will emerge in a different state of being, a very heightened consciousness to that which we entered. And I think that's highly likely to be this year. I mean, Richard Rudd would say next year, because he's very focused on 2027, I think, in his teachings from Ra. But I would say this year is the big year of transition. I mean, you can see, what is it, week 3 of January, how much is happening in the world already. This is going to be kind of wild and crazy out there at the 3D level as we really build momentum in heart coherence at higher dimensions. I mean, we have apparently, just like you exceeded all expectations with your Piercing the Film, Hope, apparently humanity is exceeding all expectations in its ability to hold higher frequencies of consciousness.
That is what my folks are saying, my peeps up there, as well. There's a strong element of building, if it hasn't already been built, self-love. First, we talk about heart coherence, and I love your building momentum of heart coherence. And I think that's where we're going with this. If we're going to prepare for this whatever transition, the heart element is the key. It's really the only place to go, because our minds aren't going to be able to make sense of it. And we need to start with our own selves. We need to start, and this is whether it's Yeshua, whoever's speaking, they are really laying into this idea. And it's not new. But I think any of us who have kind of gone down the rabbit hole with self-love, there are all kinds of ways that we block ourselves to be able to truly perceive what that needs. Oh, I like myself, that's good. No, it's deep acceptance of all our human frailties, of everything. It's deep forgiveness, right? And so if we were, I'm curious, is there a constellation or an outer planet or something that carries that frequency of self-love, self-forgiveness? Is there something you can think of that would be something we could kind of...
Yeah, I Venus, actually. I think Venus, is so much about love and the sacred feminine. And I really think it's so interesting that a three-eye atlas, as you know, is still flying through our solar system. And various people have shared this with me, people whose judgment I would very much respect, have said that as three-eye atlas passed at its closest point to each of the planets, Mars, which I think was on October the 3rd, Venus, I had a very powerful experience then, on November the 3rd from memory, it is activating those planetary archetypes to a higher level, level of expression. And of course, it will be flying by to the closest point to Jupiter on March 16, 17, before it exits. And we don't, it's not on an orbit, it's on a one-time flyby, as far as we know. But there does seem to be a level of activation, because it wasn't just me that had this extraordinary experience. Other people have reported them too, of feeling just this incredible wave of love and bliss that was infinite. Had two during the night, on that night when it was closest to Venus. So I would say Venus is the best place to go, because also the mythology of the dwarf planets is less known, so they're kind of less accessible. Everybody knows that Venus represents love and kind of the divine feminine as well.
Right.
So be my go-to planet. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. And that's so recognizable, it's so easy. And so I'm just thinking of people watching this and thinking, you can tune into Venus with your heart, of course, and you can put some of her iconography around and just keep aligning with that. And especially for men.
Men have got divine feminine too. It's not an expression of gender. It's an expression of frequency, really.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, taking another little turn here. Recently, there was news of this black hole that suddenly erupted. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
It's quite stunning. It's been dormant for like 10 million years, and all of a sudden it opened up. And again, it's an anomaly. They don't just wake up like that. So something is prompting it. And one thing I read about it was that it reminded me of Pluto. It's a change maker. So this is recent, like within the last week. And I think it's another sign that we are on this trajectory of great change. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I'll find it. Go ahead.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see the link. Maybe put the link beneath the video. That'd be really super. But what is interesting, Hope, when Pluto moved into Aquarius, which it began to do in 2023, and it hadn't been there since 1798. So, this is a big deal. And every time Pluto moves through Aquarius, and it's got a 248-year orbit, so it doesn't matter if it was in the 1200s, the 1500s, and then the late 1700s, we always go further out in the cosmos. We discover more of the out there.
Oh.
Partly because our telescopes are bigger and stronger, but also, of course, it isn't just the out there, it's coming from the in here, it's coming from the expansion of our consciousness. So I knew when Pluto started to move into Aquarius, we would start to see a lot more out there activity. So whether it was all those strange drones happening principally over the US, or whether it's three-eye atlas, which is completely anomalous, or whether it's this black hole erupting, which is completely anomalous, or even 2 days ago, the brilliant geophysicist Stephen Burns was talking about how anomalous the Schumann resonance is at the moment. He can't account for it, and that's the heartbeat of the Earth. There are going to be anomalies everywhere because we are changing our state so rapidly. So we've left linearity, we've left the tram tracks.
Yeah.
Or is going to be the unpredictable, the jump, the genetic jump in state, which is what Richard Rudd mentioned at the start of 2025. And so we are going to see these all over the place. I think you're spot on, Hope, in talking about these spontaneous evolutionary happenings. I think that is absolutely where we're at, because there's certainly spontaneous changes of consciousness right now for people. People are spontaneously speaking light language or becoming telepathic. All of a sudden, they don't do a course or read books to how to speak light language. Just boom, they speak light language. So these jumps are going to be happening because the energy is no longer linear, or not to such an extent, it's discontinuous. Aquarius is discontinuous energy. Uranus, particularly when it moves fully into Gemini on April 26th until 2033, is discontinuous. And it's very much to do with galactics, our galactic connection, a lot of light codes coming in from the galaxy, which are stimulating our DNA and helping us make these evolutionary changes, shift from carbon to crystalline. All of this is happening kind of all at once. But it was very clear to see in the astrology as well. So it's thrilling, actually. It's thrilling to see this manifesting with such promise and potential, and for me, clarity, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of that old story, which I think is true, but I couldn't prove it, of Captain Cook and his ships sailing to the Polynesian islands, and most of the people could not perceive those ships. It was the shaman of the village who said, these are coming our way. But their consciousness, most of the people's consciousness, was not expanded enough to take in the new information. And with all this spontaneous growth that people are experiencing, as you just said, and this ability to perceive more and more, I feel like we're those villagers being able to finally kind of part the ways more and more, things that maybe have been there all the time, and we just didn't have the high tune frequency enough to perceive them.
I would agree 1000%, because it's no longer about linear progress. Right. It's expanded perception, and it's a remembrance, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's remembrance of the kind of abilities we had. The people talk about this, this time in history as the pinnacle of civilization. I think that's very far from the truth. I think we're kind of barbarians at the moment, still murdering. It's just horrendous. So, if we go back to ancient times, and you will know this better than me, of ancient Lemuria, just the ancient shamanic wisdom, they were so much more gifted, or so much more aware of their abilities than we are now. But it's coming back online. We are remembering those incredible gifts, and to connect to the earth and the cosmos and our galactic family. And we are going to add more abilities on beyond we had before. So it's a remembrance, it's a going back and recovering via that shedding of the veil. But it's also developing new abilities going forwards that we hadn't experienced before. So it's a thrilling time, because it's going to move so fast. It is not going to be dull. It's not going to be boring. It's going to move really fast. This year, my days seem to last about 3 hours. I didn't bother you with that. I mean, it's hi, another radar. I just,
think, yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And it's interesting too, because there have been a couple of refrains that have come in recently. I kind of along these lines, because it's rethinking the programming that we've been given, that we've been told since you and I were children. Gee, there are too many people on the planet. The planet can't sustain all these people, and blah, blah, blah. But my team came in not long ago and said, listen, every person who is present on the planet today has that, for lack of a better word, God spark, that essence, that light within them. Most people are good people. It is because there are so many people on the planet with that light within them, even if they're not awake. that we have the potential to tip this scale this time around into make the leap, right? And tip it into the world we want to see. There haven't been this many people on the planet. If there hasn't been enough engines in a way, or if every person is a little engine, if now we have the power, now we have the steam to be able to take that leap. And I thought, wow, what an incredible reframe of a thing that seemed negative for these many years into a positive. Oh, it makes sense now.
I really agree with that. And it's really interesting as well, because, there are 8 billion of us on the planet. But as I understand it from Dr. David Hawkins' work, his map of consciousness, and also Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, they are all saying that it takes a tiny percentage of humanity with high frequency to actually positively influence a great mass of people, because that's much more influential energy, downward causation, than the other way around. And so, yes, there are an awful lot of people on the planet, but even if they still represent a small percentage, it doesn't matter. It's enough to get beyond the tipping point, and we are already beyond the tipping point. I mean, our ascension is now unstoppable, I feel, and that's kind of confirmed by these much more gifted people I speak to, that we are now, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. Mm-hmm. This is now unstoppable. Mm-hmm. However much noise and clanging and shouting and pantomime there's going to be, this is an unstoppable snowball running down it.
Oh my God. It's so beautiful, and we are so fortunate. I'm glad we chose to be here for this. It's an incredible honor, and to be able to continue to communicate, hold your ground, hold your stillness, hold your heart, hold the love, to be able to just, kind of on repeat, say these things. It helps me as I do it, but when I listen to you, it helps me as well. And I just think we're just so blessed in a way to be here at this time.
Yeah, and it hasn't always been easy, has it? Like, collectively or individually, it has not always been a walk in the park.
Not at all. It takes, we're going back to that word conviction. We have these choices to make. Like, a lot of times, I think people are sort of not aware of how significant that choice is. They kind of awash in the stuff, and they have these ideas of, gee, wouldn't it be great? Or, okay, I'm going to meditate today, or whatever, but they haven't made that choice, that commitment to a point of view. And once they make that commitment, that conviction that you hold so beautifully, once they do that, what they don't realize is everything is going to adhere and cohere around that choice. Right. And then it's a question of holding that. And that's where, as you say, it can get to be a little challenging, because we're pulled and pushed, and and we're tempted, and information comes in and it can knock us off. But having made the choice, it gets easier and easier if we keep coming back to that touchstone. And that's why we have so many teachers at the stroke of our little fingers. People can dial in Pam, people can dial in David Clements, people can dial in long list. You've named many of them. And we can come back to our original conviction.
Yeah, absolutely, Hope. And I think that's what's most important. And I think through this year, we are going to see a lot of people waking up. We're going to have these big revelations of truth that are going to be shocking and head-spinning for many people. They will really virtually force waves of mass awakening as we go through.
Yes.
So I think that can feel destabilizing and kind of crazy, and everything I believed, what are you telling me is, well, actually, yes, that's right. And be easy if you're still giving your power away to the external, to get caught up in the drama and the distraction and the complexity. The outside world is extremely complicated. So I call myself a simple bumpkin, because I really think I am, because I always bring it back to the simple, from the inside out, not the outside in. Plan stillness meetings with yourself all through the day, maybe 3 or 4 times a day. Say, okay, those are the times when I'm just going to close my eyes, drop into my breath, do the yogic baby belly breath, which is free on my meditation page of my website. Anybody can do it. You download it as an MP3, or just listen to your breath, which you slow for, say, 10 breaths. And particularly if you're feeling stressed or something isn't flowing or you're having tech glitches or whatever, just, okay, you think you've got no time, take time out to do that. And then infinity wave, your beautiful downloading vision of the infinity wave, use that. I use that all the time, Hope. And things just, when you come back, things just start to flow. So everything becomes very simple if you live from the inside out. If you see yourself as a lighthouse, if you drop into your breath, you drop into your heart, your head, your heart. If you feel and intuit your way through life rather than thinking it, which we always have done, if you use the infinity wave, if you use the Hawaiian prayer, the forgiveness, the Ho'oponopono, that's another thing. But keep it simple. Every morning I take out my neighbour's Labrador, who I absolutely adore, and we put the world to rights. And I walk through ancient woodland. I often go down to a little stream where there are dragonflies in the summer. I've talked about this many times, and I throw sticks for him in the stream, like I did when I was 3 years old with my old dog. And I'm in bliss. I'm in complete bliss, whatever the weather. And that kind of grounds me and makes me, and do you know, Hope, this is bringing back to me, many years ago when I was in my mid-20s, I went off, and I know you and I have got a lot of love for the Himalayas, and went off on my own and spent 5 months on this huge adventure and going into Nepal soon after it was opened. It used to be a closed kingdom. So there I was all on my own and, went to this trekking association, which at the time I think was the only one in Kathmandu, and said, I'd love to do this trek up the Annapurna range. And they were so sweet, and they gave me 3 Sherpas to obviously guide me and feed me and pitch the tent, etc. And they didn't speak a word of English. They couldn't say hello, goodbye, thank you, nothing. And so off we went on this 7-week trek to 19,000 feet. And it was one of the, and I didn't see another Westerner the entire 5 months I was there, because this is way back in the mid-70s. This is a long time ago. And, people, it was one of the best things I did in my life. And, yes, you struggle for breath at high altitude, but they looked after me so lovingly, even without the language. They'd always pitch the tent facing east, so I could see when the sun came up in the morning, and they'd bring you a bowl of warm water in the morning, and you learned quickly to start with your teeth and work down rather than the way around. And, they were so loving. And later people have said, didn't you worry they would be really they were just beautiful. You know the Nepalese people very well. And I remember as we started to come down from 19,000 feet, because the air gets heavier, and gradually over the days and weeks, you start to see the foothills and, the little lights. And I remember, the point of me all rambling on about this is, I remember thinking life is so simple and we make it so incredibly complicated. And that, goosebumps, and that lesson has stayed with me, to touch into simplicity in chunks of my day, not just minutes, but chunks of my day, to bring me back to what is absolutely infinite and essential and fundamental in life. If we get that right, if we get our inner state of being right, everything cascades from that. Just like you were saying earlier, everything cascades from that inner state of being. If we are broadcasting love, joy, peace, compassion, gratitude, you attract those experiences into your life. And yes, we can be aware of the kind of crazy pantomime unfolding in the world, but we don't emotionally engage with it and say, oh my God, we're all doomed and finished. You emotionally disengage from that because you say, that's my timeline. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, so much sense. And I couldn't even tell you how much I agree. And I think this simplicity is a real key to this. I remember at one point within the last 15 years, and I was doing a channeling one morning by myself. I was just, I don't know what I was doing, but all of a sudden being called creator, spelled out creator. And so I was chatting with creator, which we can all do. I'm not special. But I was, as a lay person, searching for a unifying principle. Like, all the brilliant minds of the world, but I'm just in my little self thinking, wouldn't it be great if there was a unifying principle? And of course, I expected it to be complicated. And Creator showed me, actually, an infinity. It was black on black, so black background, black infinity. And everything in creation was on the surface of the infinity. It was all held in a unified field of infinity. And it was moving, and it was like everything's right there. And I remember coming up against my own inner bias that it had to be complicated. And I was like, oh, I said, it's that simple? He goes, yes, it's that simple. It's all of a piece. It's all held together. It's all moving, and that's what it is. Now, people can argue with that and say that's ridiculous, but coming back to this point of simplicity, I went, okay, from now on, it's got to be simple. And the wave is simple. It's so simple. It's got to be simple because how can everybody grasp it? I mean, we don't, we don't need to be special in some way to be able to grasp these truths that are few and lasting. And I think developing the daily habits, as you have, and you beautifully talked about, and they don't have to be complicated. Mm-hmm. And they ground us back into our truth. When we talk about truth, how many can we really say? Just a handful, really. And so touchstoning on those simple things that we can say, yes, this is true for me. And your daily walks, I want to take that daily walk with you with the doggy.
I love it. We are such great mates. And he's got a great sense of humor, actually. So we have lots of fat jokes between us. But anyway, but if you can only find coherence, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Hope, you can only find coherence if you go inwards to your heart. If you're looking outwards to the news, to external authority figures, you're going to scatter. It's going to become incoherent because you're spinning between this narrative and this narrative and this narrative. You're just giving it all away. You can only truly find that coherence by turning inwards. And it's the heart that will lead us, not the head, because we've lived through such an information age and taught, really, encouraged to have short attention spans, but it's the feeling, it's the intuition that will guide our decisions and our choices much more going forwards. And I know you'll agree with this rather than the head, because everybody's intuition is being upped right now. Everybody's psychic sensitivity and, just reading a person without them even speaking, or reading the energy in a room or a place, you can pick it up, certainly for me, much more easily than I could even a year ago. Yeah, you're seeing this all the time.
Yes. And we've got, I want to talk a little bit about the heart, and I also want to talk about the models that are already existing in the non-speaking autistics. And I know you interviewed Susie recently, Susie Miller. I love her so much. These folks are the new human. I think, they are our bridge. They're walking examples of the next iteration. And speaking of intuition, holy cow, that's what they are. That's what they do. And they are very heart coherent. You said something recently that I couldn't agree with more, and that is that this next level of humanity is a totally inside job. It is us evolving internally. That's why the wave came, to help to handle all these incoherent things happening on the outside, to keep ourselves in the love and compassion that keeps that lighthouse strong. But also, it's working to make us more, to help us evolve along a path, because we could evolve in various ways, but we want to evolve from this internal place, from this heart coherence. And it's just so cool when that is happening on the inside. And way out there in the cosmos, as you tell us all the time, are these signals, are these stories, is this pathway. Even in, Chartres Cathedral, there are the 4 fixed signs carved there in the stone, which I was just listening to Randall Carson, and he was talking, if you take those 4 fixed signs, they make a cross. They make a sign literally in the sky that is telling us something. It's a map in a way. So we have this internal process, and we have the reflection in the cosmos. And they are speaking to one another. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's why it's so interesting. Thank you. I think that's why your birth chart is, and I've had this confirmed by Lee Harris's channeling and also Zach via my good friend Jan Terrell, that our birth chart is etched physically, not just energetically, but physically, electromagnetically in our hearts. Mm-hmm. That becomes like your unique signature, your resonance, like a tuning fork to the transits, the planets that are moving around all the time in their orbits in the heavens. They are forming different geometry and different, I believe, magnetic resonances with your own unique birth chart in your heart.
Oh my goodness, Pam.
And that starts to be, that's like the symphony of the spheres.
Yes.
Your unique song.
Oh my goodness, you just blew my mind.
That's why I think it's going to be all about magnetic resonance going forwards. Kind of physics of consciousness. Yeah, and that's why I think that, and we haven't fully discovered it or, got to the bottom of it, but I think we will discover it. That's how astrology works.
Oh, God. Thank God for you, honestly. That is so profound. So profound. I mean, look, I've been doing this for decades. You've been doing this for decades, and you just dropped something that is, wow. Thank you for that understanding. I don't think that gets spoken of enough.
Yeah. If we go goosebumpy, then that's kind of validation that there's truth in that. And I think we will absolutely discover that in a measurable way in this lifetime. I truly think we will. But that's the heart, excuse the pun, of the concept.
Wow. Okay, I'm still digesting, and because now so many things are coming off of that. But it's a solemn, sacred thing that just came out. And so I almost don't want to layer anything else on it, even though my mind is spinning. So we're going to have another chat, Pam.
Fantastic. Lovely.
I want to leave people. I want to leave people with that because it's. I don't know if anybody has voiced it in the way that you just did. And we just landed on it organically, and I want to have people just resonate with that a little bit. So I think we will say sayonara right now for the moment. I'm levitating. Oh. Thank you, my dear friend. I love you so much.
I've never expressed it in that way before.
You just blew the top off, okay, honey? You just did that.
It's amazing, it's conversations with you, Hope, that have pictured the top.
Well, I think we build on each other, and we never know where it's going to go, but that really, wow, it's all of a piece.
It is.
In a very real way.
Consciousness. It's one organic consciousness. They are not separate bits of rock out there. It's one organic consciousness.
Yeah, and it's personal.
Yeah.
And it's not personal. That's it. Not
Yeah, we are fractal expressions of divine intelligence.
We are. All right, my friend. Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that story again of your trek in Nepal. And I think it really proves how much of a gate opener you are at your core. You demonstrated at a very young age a fearlessness or a willingness to push past your fear and go into literally the stratosphere of our planet, the highest place on our planet, and just go for it without knowing anything, as something in your heart was calling you there, and it formed who you are. You're a gate opener for sure, and for many